Hello, everybody. I am, as you can see down here in the lower left, Bill Schlund, and I'll be going through some of the concepts of Onshape that allow people to be more innovative than your typical product development system. So first of all, Onshape is 100% in the cloud. No one else can say that. You know, there's no plugins, there's no downloads, nothing like that. So what that means is there's very low hardware costs, very low IT involvement or cost associated with that. Also, as long as you have access to the internet, you have access to Onshape. If you're an administrator, you can administrate the people and other things, other aspects of Onshape from anywhere as well. It's also very secure in the cloud. We run on Amazon Web Services, but we have role-based access, a complete audit history of everything and everyone who has accessed or worked with anything. We also have two-factor authentication, and Onshape is certified to work with other people's data. That's what this SOC2 type certification is. Interesting thing about Onshape is we release software all the time. Every 3 weeks, new improvements are added to Onshape, and everybody is on the same release. Since you're hitting the cloud, you're hitting the same version of Onshape, so you never have those issues of being out of sync with maybe another customer or vendor that you're working with. Everybody is on the same version all the time. Also for innovation, you know, some companies we're a Dell house, we're an HP house, we're an Apple house. You don't have to be any house if you're working with Onshape. Any type of hardware you have, Onshape can use it to work with. Very, very few people, I don't really know of any, but I'm gonna think there's gotta be somebody out there that is broad and available to use so many different hardware platforms, that kind of flexibility as what Onshape can do. Also, speaking of innovation, we can talk about collaboration and communication, not only between us inside a company, but also with our partners or vendors maybe outside the company. There's this real-time collaboration where we're working on the same geometry, the same drawings, the same information as everybody else. There's not copies, this concept of files and making copies and checking in and checking out and all the traditional stuff like that. It's not like that at all. There's built-in commenting and follow mode. So as we're working together on the same assembly at the same time, if we want, then we can see what the other person is doing. We can make comments back and forth because we might not be co-located. We might be in very differing places. We can also create branching. So that's what we see in the lower right-hand corner. We have a history tree, right? We start at the beginning and we start adding things and creating things and we go through history. But we can also branch off at any point we want and maybe do some offshoots, maybe have somebody work on something on the side. And then if we like the work, we can merge it back in. And if we don't, we just can leave it out there. But we're always working on the same information. We can restore from any point. So I can go anywhere in this history tree, pick on that point in time and say, this is what I want my current release to be. Or I can say, compare this point to what the current version is of this part and show me the differences. And that's what we're seeing here, right? We can see how this part has evolved from, really it was a single part here where it was split, bent, added a third and fourth part in there. So all kinds of things are going on with him. But we can see the whole history of that anytime that we want. There's a live viewing tool. So, you know, everybody has viewers, right? But this viewer requires no plugins, no downloads because it's in the cloud. Just send somebody a link and they have the Onshape interface and they can view, cross-section, explode views, measure, all those types of things that a viewer would allow you to do. We can also assign tasks. So data management and this concept of managing your data is built into Onshape as well, which allows innovation because we're not bouncing between two different applications, one that makes stuff and one that manages the stuff we make. It's all in one. Here we also can create these tasks, again, asking people to do certain things. And you know, they'll have a panel, right, that says here are your to-do lists to go through them. Again, you don't have to use it, but it's an aspect of Onshape that allows you to innovate. We also have a great variety of design tools, allow us to do a lot of interesting things. So first of all, we have a modern-based parametric system, but we also have the concept of multi-body or multi-parts, right? So we can create the same number of components in a single part, but those components can also be separate, be used to make drawings of each one. We can add them to other assemblies, all of that. Also sheet metal capabilities, configurations. By that I mean, kind of families of parts or assemblies. As we see here, we have a couple of different variations of these insulators. Then we can also have standard content libraries, access to those. So nuts and bolts and fasteners and things like that. Standard industry type things we can just pull down from the library and leverage that, not have to recreate something along those lines. Custom features, speaking of or creating things, maybe something that doesn't exist in Onshape. You certainly have, everybody has the ability to create their own. There's also a library of these customized features that people have made over the years, maybe for doing structural steel or for doing gears or things like that. Those are all available. You just add them to your Onshape and then you have those capabilities as well. There are non-parametric editing tools. So if we're bringing in information to help us innovate, a lot of times we might have to leverage other information that wasn't made in-house. Maybe something from some industrial designers that are sending us some ideas or something. We can bring that information in and work with it. By using non-parametric editing tools, we can still push and pull, change radiuses, do all those kinds of things, move ribs so that we can get things the way that we want. There's built-in version and release management. Again, I mentioned before, the whole data management aspect of this, all built into Onshape, so we can actually keep track of versions. We can release things. Here's the built-in release management workflow. So everything we start off as kind of work in progress, people review it, and then it can either be accepted or rejected. This is really important right here. No one else can say this. No lost work due to crashes. Onshape doesn't crash. Or if it does, you would never see it. I'm going to say maybe it does. I've never seen it myself. But what happens is you're in the cloud and Onshape's running on a server. And let's say something happened. It just rolls over to the next server. You never notice that there was any interruptions or anything like that. And because it keeps track of everything you do, you never, ever lose any work. So Onshape doesn't crash and you don't lose work. That is a big productivity tool and really helps people innovate because they don't have to be afraid of losing work ever. So with that, let's kill the PowerPoint. Let's talk a little bit about Onshape and work with it. So I log into Onshape. This is my home page. And what I see here are components and assemblies and things I've worked on recently. Here are different folders that either I have created or other people have shared with me. So this is how we kind of organize our information. I'm going to hit or talk about a couple of things here. First of all, from a company standpoint, here we can see that we have the different users of my company that have access to Onshape. And then what type of user are they? Are they a light user, a full user? Are they a guest? Things like that. We also have, I mentioned before, release management built in. So this is that workflow that we saw earlier. Also, automatic part numbering mechanism in here so that we can have either a prefix if we want that or not, how many characters are in our part numbering, and it automatically then generates those part numbers as we go forward. So this is customizable, but at least you have that capability to use automatic part numbering should you want to do that. We also have from a personal level or a user level, we can set up our defaults. These are the questions that you get asked the very first time you get logged into Onshape. It'll say, what kind of standard units do you want to use? Things like that. And again, you can always change these, but it wants to know a default. Going down here a little bit further, we realize that most people using Onshape have come from another CAD system. So it says, what CAD system did you come from? We'll make the mouse behave exactly the way that CAD system did. So you can learn Onshape faster. And then there's also this capability, we see this in other systems, a little pop-up menu where we can customize the different commands that we want to have on that pop-up menu. Again, so we don't have to move our mouse and move our eyes and that fatiguing thing. If you're using, working on a CAD system or working on a computer screen all day, this kind of helps alleviate some of the fatigue that you get from doing something along those lines. But let's go back and talk a little bit about Onshape. I'm going to open up what's called a part studio. So when you start Onshape, you start a part studio. A part studio is the information that you would store that have to do with a particular part or product that you're working on. So for instance, I have a sketch here that I'm going to start out with. But I also have some other information here. I put in a folder in my Part Studio, and if I open that up, I have a couple of images. So where we're going to go today is we're going to design part of this chair that we see here. So these basically the components here that support the chair. We can kind of zoom in on that a little bit more, and we can see kind of a close-up. These will be the components right here that we're creating. And so this is going to be kind of some information. We got this from our industrial designer. This is the kind of chair that I've developed. Can you now, as a mechanical person, develop this product so that we can sell it? So really, and I could have spreadsheets in here, customer feedback, results from different types of analyses, all kinds of things can be stored in this Part Studio. So let's go back and take a look at our sketch. Just looking at it here, it's really straightforward, just some lines, an arc, a circle. So nothing too crazy here, but we're going to use this as the base for our chair. So you'll notice from the interface that we see across the top is that these are all the commands that Onshape has. So it's a very clean, easy to use interface, easy to learn. So here are all the things for parametric capabilities. Here are the non-parametric. I mentioned that before. If we're getting geometry that doesn't have numbers that we can change on it, we can still grab faces and edges and groups of geometry and manipulate those. We also have sheet metal capabilities, so we see those over here. And then here's some user-defined type features I mentioned before. Here's one for structural beams and things that I've added in that I use sometimes. So all the things that I need to create any types of geometry are right here. Here's our feature tree, or kind of our history tree, everything that we've created. So you can see we started off with, 3 planes, and then we got some sketches here. And we have no parts yet because we haven't created any geometry, but if we have multiple parts, they'd start showing up here. So let's start doing that. So I'm going to grab this sketch, and I'm going to say, let's extrude this out. And we'll say, we're working in millimeters, so we'll say maybe 100 millimeters, and let's maybe do it symmetrically, something like that. So now I have a first start at this. So every feature that we create in Onshape has this type of an interface. We have all the options on here, and then you either hit the check mark, you want it, or X, you don't want it. But you'll notice as soon as I put that in there, I put this in as part number 1. And I can name this whatever I want. I can assign material properties to it. I can change its color, all these types of things I can do with this particular part. So let's go in and let's kind of hide that sketch for a second. Let's start to kind of hollow this out. So I'm going to use a command called a shell. Typically use that to make a thin-walled part, and this is pretty much kind of a thin-walled part. Maybe before I do that, though, I might want to save myself a little bit of work by just putting in some rounds. So I'm going to say, let's put in, or maybe a radius of like 6, and maybe add it to an edge here, edge back there, and then maybe put in a different radius. And again, when I start offsetting this by putting in these radiuses now, it's going to save me from having to put in 2 sets later on. And then let's just put in one last one, kind of a big one down on the bottom here. So now we've got kind of something we can start working with. Like I said, now we want to start hollowing this out. So I'm going to use this shell command. I'm going to say, let's just remove some surfaces. So all I do is pick on the surfaces, and they start going away. I can specify the wall thickness. We can maybe make it like 4 millimeters thick here. Start picking on some surfaces here. As you notice, as I pick each one, it's removing that and giving us a wall thickness of 4. Right? So this will be our part so far. Sort of a stamping, I guess, or sheet metal part, but technically this isn't. We're going to have to create some other geometry for this. Obviously, this is going to be the bottom part of the chair that the seat sits on, but a chair always has a post on it, so I'm going to have to go and create that. So I have another sketch over here. I'm just going to take this and say, let's extrude it. You'll notice that the first time as it extrudes it, it says, do you want to make this a new part? Do you want to add it to the existing one? Do you want to remove it? Do you want to intersect it? So these are the typical kind of Boolean-ish type commands. We also have surfacing, so we could be doing this all in surfaces. What I'm going to do with this particular part is, instead of saying, let's go blind distance, I'm going to say go through up until you hit something. And as soon as it goes and hits that part, it says, well, maybe you want it the same as this part. So you notice that it switched from being new to add, and we no longer have part number 2 down here. It's now considering it to be part of part number 1. I could switch it back and make it independent, but it's all part of the same part. They get welded together. And maybe in the second direction, I'm gonna say I maybe want it to go down maybe like 35 millimeters. So now we've got a good start on our part that we want to create here. Another thing that I want to do is maybe make a cut in here. So I'm just going to take this guy and we'll say, let's extrude him out, and we'll do a symmetric. So you can tell I made a couple sketches in here, kind of save some time. So here's the thickness that we want to do here. And then let's take the same guy, and this time we're going to remove material. So I'm going to say, let's remove some things symmetrically and give it a different value. So now we're kind of making a little cutout. So this is what we have. One of the other things, basically the post has still got to fit through here a little bit. So let's just take that and we'll extrude that up. And we'll say, let's remove material. Let's see, oh, we gotta pick this face. That guy. And we'll flip them and just kind of drag them through. Something like that. A clever guy would say up until surface or something like that, but we'll just leave it like this. We're just kind of cutting some material through there. At this point, maybe we're going to put in a couple other radiuses, just kind of finish off the general idea. Maybe put this in, maybe put in a radius 8, and then something along the top too to kind of round that off. So now we've got something that we can work with. So this is the start of our chair that we're working with. Up until now, other than the fact that we've been in the cloud the whole time, it looks like a lot of other CAD systems that are out there. What I'm going to do now is do something that other CAD systems can't do. So I'm going to look for help. So we have a guy in our company, not here with me, but I want to invite him to create a sheet metal part, kind of the back part for this. So I can make some comments on things. I can pick on a surface and say, you know, I want you to look at this surface. I'm just going to create kind of a general comment. And to who it is, I can just start to type in his name, and it looks through that list of people in my company. Here he is, and I'll just say, can you make a sheet part? And I'm going to assign that to Nick, right? So it's going to show up on his to-do list of things to do. When I say assign now, he's going to get an email that says you are now sharing your part with Nick. Up until now, no one has had any access to this. So that's kind of the way Onshape works. You don't send out copies of things, right? You give them access. It's like a whitelist. Who do you want to have access to this? And when they have access, what do you want them to do with it? You have total control. And as soon as you don't want Nick over here to access the part, I just hit the little X next to his name and he no longer has access to it. But he gets an email. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if he clicks on the email, so this is Nick over here. I'm going to kind of maybe move my screen over a little bit. He'll log in, right? So he'll sign in. So the hyperlink just said, you know, Bill's sharing you a part with you, and you can see here signed to Nick. Nick, can you help with this sheet part? So you can go and say, sure. Let's take a look at this. I'm gonna move this window over a little bit. He can select on it. He can see the chair here, and he can say, let's view this. So the interesting thing here is that Nick is going to see the exact same thing. I'm inviting him in to my session to start working with this. So you notice his little comment screen is popping up over here, and he sees the same part. It's not a copy, it's the exact same part. Now, one of the things that we can do is I could say, you know, I need you to work on this, and I can, you know, comment and things like that. But we can also do something along the lines of what's called follow. And so he's going to follow me, and as I zoom in, he zooms in. As I rotate, he rotates. So he is following me. And really what I want him to do, you notice his little cursor has changed to a hand that's pointing. And I'm going to say, you know, we need you to create a sheet metal part in this area here that fits between here and here, and will be the back part for the chair. So I can explain that in words. I can call him on the phone because, like I said, he could be somewhere totally different than where I am. Lots of different ways that we can communicate, working together collaboratively like this. He's also totally independent to do whatever he wants to. He's not forever tied to me and what I see. So one of the things that you'll notice is his menus are different than mine, right? He has the ability to do cross sections, he can make comments, he can change colors, he can explode things, measure things, but he can't create any geometry. So what I'm gonna do is say, I'm gonna give him the capability to do that. So under our share over here, I can say, let's change. Right now it says he can view. I'm just gonna say, let's change that so that he can edit things as well, create geometry. And I'm gonna say, you can make a copy of it. Yeah, I don't want him to export it out. I don't want this thing going anywhere else but here. And then I'll say update his capabilities. So now all Nick has to do is just refresh his browser, and you'll notice that his menus down here will change, and he'll now have full capabilities to do the work that he needs to do while I keep working on this part. Now I could keep it like this where he's working with me in here. He can be creating his part and I can still be working on this one because I got some other work to do, maybe make a drawing, stuff like that. What I'm going to do is take advantage of some of the capabilities that Onshape has, where I'm going to go in and first of all, we have the history of everything that I've done here, right? So where we started off, and then we've inserted some features and created the post and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I'm going to do is make a version. And this is just, I'm just going to save a snapshot in time and say at this particular point, I'm going to say this is make, I don't know, like the make back part or something like that. So that's our version. And you'll notice that that is created in our history tree as a little filled in dot. So I can always go back at this point in time and say, this is what it looked like before we made the back part. But now I'm going to take this and I'm going to say, let's create a branch. And I can just call this like Nick's sheet part. And I'm going to give him access to that branch so he can start creating geometry over there. And if I like it, then I'll just say I want to use it. And if I don't like it, I'll say, you know, go back and kind of refinish it. So either I can keep him working alongside with me in here, or I can kind of give him a branch and maybe a couple different people, let him do a couple different things at the same time, and then pick and choose which things I want to include. Could be more than one that I want to include. But anyway, so Nick will automatically see this, right? So he can go back to this and he'll say, okay, I'm going to work on my branch over here. And me, I'm going to just continue doing my stuff over here. One of the things that I can do is, I'll just show you one thing. I'm going to say, I want to create a chamfer. And we'll say, maybe like not a real big one. I'll just put one here. If I put one there, put one there. I'll say, okay. Nick doesn't see it, right? Because he's in his own branch right now. So after all, you know, then we can copy in his information. But right now we're kind of like we're on the same part, the same concept. We're just branched off from one another. So what Nick has to do, because he's kind of the sheet metal guy more than I am, he's going to start creating some geometry. So he's going to create this thing right here. We'll kind of extrude this guy out. We'll say symmetric. And let's say 92 millimeters. So you notice his part kind of fits there, fits inside, so that will work out well for our needs. One of the things, since he's kind of a sheet metal guy, he's going to have to turn this into a sheet metal part. We'll get a chance to see what sheet metal in Onshape looks like. So he can come in here and say, let's go in and create a sheet metal part, right? And so there's a couple different ways that we can do this, but we're going to say, let's convert this part into a sheet metal part. And then what we can say is we pick the faces we want to exclude, because we're not going to put sheet metal around all of this. So I'm going to say, let's exclude. And when and it's sort of like shelling it out like we did before. So we'll say faces to exclude. Well, this is the part that we want to do too. And we'll exclude maybe like this face and this face. And this face. And what it does is it goes in here and it starts putting sheet metal panels on all of this. So it's a little bit different than other sheet metal applications that I've worked with in the past. And we can pick these and say which ones we want to keep or which ones we want to remove. In this particular case, we'll say that the thickness is 4 millimeters. Yeah, that's good, the same as the other stuff. And then we just start picking some things that we want to remove. Let's go back here. So going back here, go back and say some other faces that we want to remove. Let's pick on this guy and this guy. I'm using Mozilla Firefox, and if I double click, it goes back into the previous screen. So let's go in here. Let's remove this face. Remove, do this part. Remove that face. Let's remove this guy, that guy, this one, that one. So you can see it's real similar to what we were doing before. Let's get rid of these two as well. But the difference being, let's kind of get rid of this guy as well. These two. All right. So now we've got our parts, our sheet metal part, the way that we want. But we also want to put in a couple of bends. Right? So we'll put in a bend here, a bend there. And you can see that it's put those in. And now we have our sheet metal component. And so Nick can take a look at this and say, yeah, this is kind of good to go. He can send me a message then, right? Comment that he's sending me something. I can come back now and kind of do a design review. So I'm going to come in and say, let's take a look at what Nick's been doing. I can come over and take a look at his work. And take a look at the sheet metal part. Yeah, looks pretty good. So I'm going to say, let's include that. I like the design, so I'm just going to say merge it in. And now it's merged in to my part, right, with our chamfer here. And so I've used Nick about the best that I can. He's got me a good sheet metal part to work with. One of the things I'm going to do is make an assembly of this, just to show you a little bit about assemblies. So I've really had two separate parts there. But here I'm going to insert them in and say, let's make an official assembly about that. Now, the thing is, the way they stand right now, I can pick any one of these parts and kind of move them around, right, wherever I want. I'm going to take this part and just kind of say, let's fix him in space, because we're going to make a mechanism, right, because this articulates. And I'm going to take this guy, kind of move him over here a little bit, and I'll say, let's put a pin joint in. So now we're in kind of assembly mode. This is while we put parts together, and we'll say, make the center of that hole line up with the center of this hole. So now it's a pin joint. And what that means is when we come back here, I can grab this guy, and now he articulates. So this is the way that we want our chair to behave. The next step would be that we have this. I'd say, let's go in and create a drawing. I'll put it on a C-size piece of paper. I'll maybe make my screen a little bit bigger here. And we're going to say, let's put in our assembly. Let's put one here. Put another version up here. Maybe a ISO view over there. And then let's try something else. Let's maybe a section view, and we'll say horizontal right about here. I'll put that maybe right there. So I'll have a cross-sectional view there, so you can see. And then maybe take our guy here. Now we'll keep the scale the same. We'll just kind of move him down a little bit. Right, and then we can start documenting, right? Creating some dimensions here that might not exist in the overall assembly or in the individual parts. So, you know, create a dimension maybe from this face over to maybe the center of this guy. And then if I wanted to put tolerances on there, you know, we could say symmetric, plus or minus. You could say 50 thousandths. There we go. We can also come in and put in a bill of material. So the BOM is, let's see, we'll put him right here. Again, we just have the names of the parts here and the quantities, but we could put in part numbers, descriptions. This is all totally customizable. If we go back to our assembly, you can see that here. The bill of material that we create here is the one that we would see in our bill of material. So maybe this part number we could say is just move that to the left, and we might want to add in what state it's in. Right? Is it released? Is it whatever? Put him in there. So now that's been added. If I go back to the drawing, it's not updated here, but there's a little yellow button saying this needs to be updated. So Onshape's really good. If things change, it tells you that they've changed, and it gives you the option to change them or not. In a drawing, yes, maybe we do, but maybe in an assembly, I'm changing a part that's used in 100 other assemblies. Maybe I don't want all those other assemblies to automatically update, so the individuals can choose whether they want the newer version to update or not. But this is a little inside look into how Onshape allows us to innovate, design faster, and together, differently than any other system that's out there. So with that, I think we're going to draw this to a close. I did run a little bit over, but thank you all for attending, and have a good rest of the week and a good weekend.